I've grown up my entire life living in the prairies, and winter always seems to catch me off guard, except when it comes to keeping my vehicle reliable for winter time. And I have collected a whole seasoned level of tips that are going to help you navigate ownership of vehicles. If you're new to the country, if you're new to winter, or maybe you're not and you just want to realize that there's some things you haven't been necessarily doing correctly, I want to share some of those tips with you today about how to get your vehicle ready for winter, safe and reliable, and to make sure that it lasts for many, many years.
Life's too short to drive boring cars.
So the first key tip you have to think about if you're navigating through all of this snow and ice, you have to realize that traction is very limited, and quite often there's icy conditions, and that makes traction very unstable, unreliable, and actually downright unsafe. So the key to actually creating a safety margin for you while you drive around, doesn't matter whether you have all-wheel drive, rear-wheel drive, front-wheel drive, you have to have a proper set of tires when you're driving around. Now the key that I've said, always either get a dedicated set of winter tires on another second set of wheels, or in fact you can get yourself a set of tires that are called not all seasons but all weathers. Because driving any kind of sports tires, summer tires, you're going to absolutely have a horrible time and it's going to be very unsafe. Even all seasons tires that people drove on for years are not that great. With all of the advancements in rubber technology, tire technology, a lot of manufacturers now create profiles and compounds that help the tires navigate, grip the roads a lot better. A lot of these tires, like you're looking at here, I put on for winter use. What you're gonna find is they're generally more aggressive, and you're gonna find lots of specific little sipes. You'll see those little cracks, and those sipes, that's actually help get in there and get better traction. But what you're looking for is tires that have this snowflake logo right there. That will be located somewhere on that tire, meaning that it's either dedicated winter tires or it's all-weather tires that are made to drive in these colder temperatures that you could encounter snow and ice. You want to make sure that you get that snowflake logo on that tire to make sure that you have the correct traction for winter driving. That's the first thing. If you can't drive down the road safely, you better not just even leave your driveway. Another major thing you really have to think about is making sure you have the right oil under the hood in the engine. You've got to have the right oil for winter conditions. When things get cold, it could be freezing temperature. You might get minus 20, minus 40 degrees in some places like we live right here. You could encounter extreme temperatures. And when you're looking at a lot of these numbers, the temperature is basically guided by the numbers you'll see right here. The 0W40, this is an indication that the lower number is the one that will impact the colder temperature when the vehicle is cold. The high number is how it performs at a higher temperature when the vehicle's warmed up and performing. So if you go with a lower number right here, you want to make sure that you do for winter driving. So either a 0W40 or a 5W40 or a 5W30 or a 0W30. Something with a 0 or a 5 is usually much better for winter, and that's exactly what you want to put in your engine prior to winter time. And so before you ever set off on any journey, like they say in the owner's manual, they always tell you should check your fluids regularly, at least once a week, and that could never be more true. Because the last thing you want to do is forget to look at something, all of a sudden your engine runs too low of oil for some reason. Maybe you have an older vehicle that burns oil, and if you don't have not just the right grade of oil or the oil levels too low, you suffer and you risk a catastrophic failure, or more importantly, even just a shutdown is enough to leave you stranded roadside, and that's the last thing you want to do. So definitely you want to give your vehicle a look over, make sure you're looking for any problems, leaks, and of course naturally you'll find a lot of times leaks. If you are sustaining a leak, you'll see a lot of times oil at the bottom or fluids or liquids. That's where you'll find it in the winter time, because everything tends to shrink, and so you want to be watching out for that. But specifically, check your engine oil regularly, and right there, if all else fails, it actually indicates and tells you either the grade of oil you should be using or where you can find the information, which is usually in your owner's manual in the glove box. Now, the second most important thing likely with your vehicle, preparing it for winter so it's reliable, is naturally the battery. And on most vehicles, the battery is somewhat accessible. Some vehicles, they bury them under the trunk, so they bury them in some obscure location. But most vehicles, you'll find the battery somewhere under the hood, and in this case, you'll notice it right here. Now, this one has a little bit of corrosion. We're about to clean that up naturally, and you'll notice the date stamp on there, 12/20. So what we're looking at is a battery that's going on 5 years of age, What you can do, one of two things. Number one, you can actually put a battery tester on there and make sure that it will load test properly, and it'll tell you how healthy that battery actually is. Most batteries these days only last 4, 5, 6, maybe 7 years if you're absolutely lucky. And a lot of that is simply because there's so much modern technology, even in non-hybrid vehicles. Everyday vehicles have so much added technology. Even parking your car for 2 weeks can sometimes mean your battery's dead if you don't use it too often. So you should do a battery check going into winter, or put a brand new battery if the battery's getting up there in age. Also, second to that, I strongly advise, and I carry one of these myself. So a lot of times the old days of battery booster cables, never really the best product to use. I mean, you've got to use it in a pinch at times. A lot of times people do. But I've gotten away from dragging around those messy, ugly cables and then bringing other people, always begging for somebody else to give you a hand. Hey, you got a set of cables. Hey, can you come give me a boost? A lot of people shy away from that because they don't want to boost you and your old clunker with their brand new Mercedes or BMW, and they risk blowing an ECU or some other issue. So a lot of times, this is what I use. Now this one here I'm not here to promote this product specifically. I do like it because it's a heavier duty, gives you a lot more cranking amps. You'll notice this one gives you up to 2,000 amps at 12 volts, which is, the battery is typically 12 volt rated. And this is very simple to use because you clip your red to positive, red goes to positive, and your black will go to negative right there. You clip that on, you press the go button, and it basically tells you even if you've got the polarity right or wrong. If the polarity is incorrect, it could damage a vehicle. And this machine is great because it tells you if it's right or wrong, and it won't proceed with a boost. But the beauty with this equipment is you don't need anybody else. You just need this. It needs to have a little bit of battery power in itself. You plug it in, and then you go crank your vehicle. And if your battery was close, maybe it just ran out of steam because it's really cold out, and usually winter weather does take a toll on batteries. The cold cranking amps goes down, you reduce your cranking capacity. This is sometimes all you need to get that vehicle started, and then you're off to the races. Maybe drive home, maybe drive to the local mechanic shop so you can get yourself a brand new battery. This here is an absolute lifesaver, and it has saved me on a couple of occasions already. One of the other most important things you have to check on a vehicle when you're preparing it for any time of year, really, it's one of the most critical fluids, but even more importantly, come winter time, you think, hey, you know what, it's winter, you can keep the vehicle cool. So you're probably thinking coolant does its job, you don't even care about it. Well, that couldn't be further from the truth, because coolant actually regulates the fluid through the vehicle and also pushes that coolant up through the heater core, which is mounted in your dashboard, and that's what gets the heat into the cabin. So if you don't have the proper coolant, and if you don't have the proper level of coolant, then you may not get heat in the cabin, as well as you risk overheating an engine, blowing up an engine that way, or some other catastrophic issue. You also have to make sure the coolant doesn't have pure water. Sometimes people get into the southern states or areas that don't necessarily need it. They end up putting just water in. That's the worst thing you can do. What you have here is the coolant overflow tank right here, the expansion tank. This is actually under pressure, but you want to make sure that the level is where it should be. Always be checking these fluids, and that goes for any time of year, but most importantly for winter. Make sure that this is mixed properly and should be checked every once in a while. You can drop it in, check the squeegee, and it'll tell you how much that is rated for. But realistically, you should be setting this up to be rated for about -40 degrees Celsius. I know in these kind of climates where you get a lot of snow and ice and colder climates like we have here, you want to make sure that it is rated for at least -35, -40 degrees Celsius right there. Make sure that the fluids are up, because even if you've got the right mix, but maybe the fluids are low, you remember the heater core sits slightly above, and even though it's a sealed system, that does create problems because that fluid, you may have open air gaps up top. If you have that high area, that's where air tends to rise, and you may find yourself absolutely not getting enough of that coolant through your heater core. Hence, you might feel that cool draft coming into your cabin in the middle of winter, even if you do have coolant. A bunch of years ago, a friend of mine had a Volkswagen, and it was heating up the cabin just fine, and then he'd round around the corner, he'd take a bit of a corner in the road, and all of a sudden you'd feel this cold air blast. Well, that's because he's sloshing around, and well, that's a combination, it's a Volkswagen, but the other combination is the fact that you get your coolant levels are too low, and it could actually just move that fluid around, and then you wind up with a bit of an air bubble in your heater core, and that's why you're getting that immediate cold blast into the cabin. So you should always make sure your coolant is of the right type, specification, color, grade. They should all be match that vehicle and never mishmash. Never use, you know, a pink fluid and then throw some green in there. Either you use the right color and for the right make and model of vehicle, or you can also sometimes mix the multi-purpose clear fluid with that. But at the very end of the day, you got to make sure that you're using the right coolant for your vehicle. Also make sure that you don't have leaks. Check your radiators, all kinds of the ends. A lot of these plastic ends, often you do find little hints of coolant leaks. If you're seeing a white chalky film along the edge somewhere, that could represent a bad radiator end here as well. So make sure that you're looking for leaks, problem areas with related to coolant. See, this was from an old leak right here. Watch for fluid leaks. You don't want to see oil and you don't want to see coolant on the ground. That could represent problems for roadside. So make sure you're all topped up and everything should be good to go. Another thing you want to check is the general condition under the hood, because the last thing you want is, sure, you've got good oil and coolant and maybe a healthy battery, but maybe you haven't taken care of some of the basics. So do just a general inspection. Make sure you don't have any major leaks. You know, you get a little bit of that moisture on top. That's not uncommon for older vehicles, but you don't want to see fresh oil dripping down. You want to make sure your power steering's fine. Check your coolant lines. Make sure not just that you've got good coolant, but that your cooling hoses are in good shape. Just give them a light squeeze. Make sure they're not bubbling or bursting anywhere. Also make sure your belts are in good shape. Make sure you don't have any cracks on any of your pulley or serpentine belts, that you don't have any issues with that, because a broken belt can literally leave you roadside in a world of hurt. So make sure you do a good scour through the engine, that you don't have any leaks or any bad areas of concern. And if you do, make sure you get those changed before you get into the severe weather. And I would always highly recommend you get that stuff sorted out as soon as you see any kind of problems looming. Get it fixed. That helps reliability. And then another thing that I would always strongly suggest, that you have a couple of those roadside things within your vehicle. If you're driving around a lot of times in the wintertime, make sure you have a blanket, roadside flares, maybe a chocolate bar and a candle and a lighter, maybe a few things that you could put in your vehicle as well. Don't forget, this here is critical. Now, I already mentioned about the tires, making sure that you have a good set of tires that are rated for the winter conditions. I also like to use this. Now, I don't use the air compressor that typically you wire onto the battery. Some people like that, but that's kind of old school and quite honestly is a bit cumbersome sometimes. I use this, and all you've got to do is make sure this is charged, take it into the house once a month, freshen it up. But this here in itself has a built-on battery charger, and it is a great air compressor. And I've featured it in another video before, but I carry this around with me all the time, because you just spin this quick little hose in here and wire this on. And the beauty is, this little piece right here spins freely, so you don't have to spin the whole device. All you got to do is just spin this on to your nozzle right there, take your cap off, spin this on, and then activate your air compressor. If your tires happen to go low, nothing puts you roadside faster than a flat tire. So it's always nice to have something that could potentially at least get you home. This great little air compressor, you can get a lot of these. They're all over the internet. There's lots of options out there, but I like these cordless ones that are battery packed. And of course, they're just super easy to work with. They're easy to hide in the back of the vehicle. They don't take up a lot of room, and they're quite reliable. So definitely have one of these, as well as that booster that I showed you and that roadside emergency kit. Those are items that you definitely want to have in your vehicle when you're driving in the winter. Another thing more on longevity and less about reliability is just, you know, a lot of these roads, they put a lot of salt on these roads. You know, you get sand and salt that the cities often put down on the roads. You want to make sure that you keep the car clean, or the vehicle, the truck, SUV. I would always strongly suggest cleaning it. Now, this one's a bad example because I am literally on my way to the car wash to give it another clean, and I try to clean this at least once a week until it gets to about -30. Then of course most car washes won't even let you in there, but generally I try to keep my vehicles clean, and I wash them a couple of times a week, at the bare minimum at least once a week. And not just wash the top and use a brush. Always get in under those rough areas, get in under the fender wells like that, get in down along the bottom edge, because those are areas a lot of times people neglect and then they start to rust away. Also make sure you get in here, get in there, and you'll notice my frame does not have a lot of rust, the corrosion on it. Nothing will rust and rot your car away faster than allowing a lot of that road salt to stay on your vehicle. So if you look down there, you'll notice it's in pretty solid shape. And this is a 2003 pickup truck here by Ram. It's clearly in great shape. It's almost 200,000 kilometers or 120,000 miles. It's in great shape, gets driven every single day, winter, summer. And that's only looks this good because I keep it clean. And you have to do that that in winter driving. If you want to keep your vehicle lasting longer, you have to keep it clean. As well, windshield washer fluid, you want to make sure that you've got good windshield wiper blades like this, and these nozzles will plug off really fast if you don't put in the right -40-degree rated windshield washer antifreeze under the hood. You definitely want to make sure you put that on there, because that's going to make sure that these nozzles spray out reliably. Sometimes you wind up just putting a little water in there, and then what ends up happening is this freezes up, and then it's no good to anybody. So make sure before you even get to the freezing temperature weathers, make sure you've got a good set of wiper blades that are reliable, that give a good job of cleaning the windshield, and that you've got rated -40 or -30-degree rated windshield washer antifreeze, that it helps and cleans your windshield. Because as you can see, you get very grimy road conditions. Look how dirty this is. This is just nasty. And that's just a result of all the slop and the salt and the sand that they throw on the city streets in the wintertime just to try to make the roadways passable. I mean, look how dirty and yucky those roads are over there. That's what's an example of what they throw on the road, and that winds up on these vehicles. So make sure you clean it, and your vehicle will be reliable and easy to use come wintertime. And with all of that said, if you're trying to do a quick roadside inspection, maybe thinking about buying a used car, you're gonna wanna check that out. That goes from tip to tail, top to bottom, of the things you wanna look for when you're buying that next used car, so you're not buying a heap of junk. Hope to see each and every one of you in the next one. See you real soon. Bye-bye.